Hello, I've just launched this challenge. CSS this thing in at most 100 lines of generated code. So here we have a bunch of triangles arranged such that they form a bigger triangle. And they're arranged in layers here. We have layer 0, 1 triangle. Layer 1, 3 triangles. Layer 2, 5 triangles. Layer 3, it has 7 triangles. And so on. 9, 11, 13. So what is this? We have the total number of triangles is going to be 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9 and so on. So if we have n number of layers, this is going to be the sum of the first n odd natural numbers, and this happens to be n squared. I'm not going to explain this. Maybe I'll do a visual explanation of this in a future video, but for now just take it like that. So the total number of triangles is going to be the number of layers squared. Now that we've done this, we're going to create the big triangle, call it B, and then we're going to loop and create all the small triangles, which we'll call A. It doesn't really matter what you call them. Just don't call them late at night. They might be sleeping. Okay. Now, this is it for the structure. Here we already have the number of layers. And we're going to be setting a few generic styles on our divs. So first of all, we're going to set position absolute. We're going to give them a width. That's going to be a dimension D. Don't worry about this, we'll compute it in a moment. And this is going to be the height. Okay. Now this dimension D is going to depend on the number of layers. So we can consider the big triangle as being a single layer. So what we need to do here is compute the get an edge length. Let's say it's going to be something like, let's make it in viewport units so that it scales nicely. Okay, and one more thing, if you remember this neon tile thing I had here, I'm basically going to copy a lot of stuff from here. So if you haven't seen this video, go watch it. So I'm basically just going to copy a lot of stuff from there. So here I'm just going to have the edge length, which was called base L in that situation. Okay, I'm also going to compute the height of the triangle, of the small triangle. So this L is the edge length of the small triangle. So here I'm going to compute the height of the small triangle, which is the circumradius plus the in radius. Okay, and now that I've computed the height here, and this is the diameter, which is twice the circumradius. In this case, I'm going to have that this D is calc the number of layers times that diameter. Okay, and the number of layers by default here, it's going to be this value. And for the small triangle represents just one layer. And we're going to set a background here. And we're also going to set a background here, which is going to be black for the big one. Now you can see I have this. One more thing I'm going to copy from here, from the neon tile, is the Mixin, which I'm going to modify a bit. So I have this a regular polygon Mixin, which I'm going to use to create the triangles. So I'm going to copy it here, and I'm going to make some changes. I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this as well. I'm not going to use this second this stuff here, I'm going to use just n here. I'm not going to have an inner array. I'm not going to need this highlight thing. So it's basically just simplifying the Mixin. So here I'm going to call this Mixin. And this is it. We have the big triangle. Sadly, the small triangle got cut out because it's not in the middle anymore. So what we need to do here is we're going to compute a factor. And this factor is going to be calc the number of layers minus 1 over, and what we're going to have here is the global one, not the one for this particular triangle. So once we have this factor here, we can compute a margin. And first we're going to have the margin top calc, and this is going to be 50 viewport height units minus half the dimension. So and it's going to look similar along the other direction, along the horizontal direction. Okay. So here we're going to have this whole thing. We're going to have it multiplied by this factor. Actually, I don't think we're going to need this factor twice. So I can just take it out and put it in here. So okay. And now you can see we have that triangle at the top. So what we've done here with this factor we've multiplied it with is 0 for the small triangle, and it's 1 for the big triangle. So we have this offset, so we put the big triangle in the middle vertically, and the small triangle at the top, 0 vertically. And one more thing, we're not going to need a margin at the bottom, so let's 0 that. And now we have this thing that's flexible, as you can see here. Okay, this looks good. And now that we've done this, we're going to set a transform. And here we're going to have translate, and we're going to have an x value and a y value, and then we're going to have rotate, and here we're going to have a rotation factor. So calc rotation factor times half a turn to determine whether our triangle points up or down. And this rotation factor, actually I'm not going to call it a rotation factor, I'm just going to call it a factor because I'm going to use it in one more place. And then I'm going to have scale 0.9. Now, one more thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the offsets. So here I'm going to have a calc value, and this is going to be, I'm going to have the horizontal index for the layer, and this is going to be minus, and this value is going to depend on the number of triangles per layer, meaning it's going to depend on the number of the layer. So the way we're going to do this, it's going to be 0.5 times, here we're going to have 2 times the layer index, which is going to be j value plus 1 And now that I've done with this, it's going to be -1. Actually, I think I can just, yeah. I think I can just do it like that. Minus the layer. We'll see if that works. It could work. But yeah, that's how you get to that. And I suppose it's correct. So yeah, we're just going to leave it at that for now. And this is going to be times half the edge length. Okay. And the next thing that we're going to have here, we're going to have calc, and we're going to have the layer index times the height of the triangle. And we might need to subtract something, and this one is going to depend on the same f value. So times, and again I need to interpolate this. Okay, so what I need to set here is I0, J0, and F0. Actually, I can set I here. I don't need the default. Okay. Now, one more thing I'm going to set here. I'm going to set a previous index. So if I'm going to start with layer 1, the previous index after layer 0 is going to be 1. So now I'm going to loop here. I'm going to have for layer L from 1 to NL. So I'm not going to take layer 0. And here I'm going to set a J. Actually, this is going to be, am I going to need this? Yeah, I'm going to need it more than once. So this is the number of triangles per layer. So this is going to be 2 times L plus 1. And now I'm going to have nth child n plus that previous index plus 1. And here I'm going to set the j, which is equal to the layer index. Okay. Next thing that I'm going to do is, I'm going to change the parity. So if I want to have a rotation, here I'm going to set the silent clause. So this gets applied if I want to have a rotation, and it's going to set that factor to 1. And one more thing I'm also going to do here, I'm going to have a function parity I, and here I'm going to return unquote if I greater than 0, then I'm going to have odd, otherwise oh, greater than 0. I wrote 1 there. Otherwise, I'm going to have even, which is the same thing as 2n. So here I'm going to have nth child, and I'm going to need to interpolate this parity of the current layer. So I'm going to have extend that rotation. Oh, yes, that's why. Okay. So, for now they're just all positioned badly, as we can see. And one more thing, here I'm going to need to have nth child minus n plus previous index plus the number of for the current layer, the number of triangles for the current layer. And one more thing that I'm going to do, and I think I can collapse this here right now, I'm going to have nth child, I'm not going to have n, it's going to be the previous layer index plus, no, actually I'm going to need to have another loop here. So for I from 0 to p, and here, no, plus p plus 1, not p, plus I, sorry. And here I'm going to have, okay, so I have for the first one and for the last one, and one more thing that I need to do here, I need to update the previous index. Okay, this is almost good. For some reason the parity doesn't get reversed, which is odd. So let's see what the problem might be. Okay, so for some reason it's always odd. Okay. So yeah, this is it. It's almost done. One more thing I need to do here is add a hover effect. So and this is it. Done. Now let's see the compiled CSS. Okay, this is way too much. So let's see what we can do about this. We're going to compute a maximum number of triangles per layer. So Pmax is going to be 2 times number of layers minus 1. And after this mixin here, we're going to have a loop for I from 0 to Pmax. And we're going to create a position I, and this is going to be I. This should do it. Okay, so here I'm not going to use this, I'm just going to extend so this should do it. And now I have less than 100 lines of code, which is great. And as you can see, when I hover, I get that red triangle. So yeah, this is it for today. You can find a link to the finished CodePen demo in the description below. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments or send them on Twitter. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you have, and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting my work in one of the ways explained in the description below, with a donation, by getting me something off my Amazon wishlist, or at least by sharing this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days, because I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching.